of genius, virtue, and of life is spontaneity, instinct, and a primary wisdom that we call intuition. The self-reliant man knows there is a difference between voluntary acts of his mind and involuntary perceptions, and he gives his faith to the involuntary perceptions which spring from the aboriginal self. He may not express these perceptions correctly or adequately, but he knows they can't be disputed. In that deep force of intuition which can't be analyzed, all things find their common origin. We can affirm its presence or absence, but if we ask from where it comes or why it exists, we have asked too much. People will argue with your perceptions that rise out of intuition as much as they'll argue your opinions. They can't tell the difference. They think you have chosen to see a thing this way or that way. Yet the thing you have seen will eventually be seen by your children, and in course of time, all mankind. For intuition to work, its channels must be clear, direct, and uninhibited by dependence on other authorities. Whenever a mind is simple and receives divine wisdom, all other things pass away, teachers, books, temples, and methods. It lives now in the present, and past and future cease to exist. Man postpones or remembers, but he doesn't live in the present. He laments the past or tries to look ahead to the future, but he will never be strong or happy until he lives with nature in the present, above and beyond time. This should be obvious, but instead we live like children, who repeat by rote the words of teachers and tutors. People are not always comfortable in the position of being in the present. In the present there is no such thing as power, for power relies on changing circumstances. Yet whoever has more soul masters those who have less, and they must revolve around him by gravitations of spirit. Those men who are formed and who live by the law of nature overpower all cities, nations, kings, rich men, and poets who do not. Self-reliance is based on the soul's affinity with God, and this affinity requires solitude. It doesn't require withdrawal from society, friends, and family, but it does require spiritual solitariness. Sit at home, says Emerson, without the rabble of men and books. Go it alone, for isolation must precede true society, but our isolation must be spiritual, not mechanical. It must elevate us. At times there seems to be a conspiracy against solitude. Friend, client, child, sickness, fear, want, and charity all knock at the door and demand that we come out. But keep your station. Stay in your own heaven. Don't be drawn into their hubbub. Instead, let the light of your law into their confusion. An oath to be himself, to obey an eternal law, to put that law before everything else. They must love him for what he is, and if they can't, he will still seek to deserve that they would. If they are noble, he will love them, but if they are not, he won't pretend at affection. If they're not in the same truth as he, they must seek their own companions, and he will seek his. He knows this view can cause pain to those closest to him, but says, I cannot sell my liberty and my power to save their sensibility. There is something godlike in trusting oneself, and it demands a great deal, being high in heart, faithful in will, and clear in sight, so that man becomes his own doctrine, society, and law. For we have become afraid of truth, of death, and of each other. Our age produces no great or perfect persons. Most people can't satisfy their own wants and have ambitions which are out of proportion to their practical force. Our arts, occupations, marriages, and religion have been chosen for us by society. We fight the small, superficial battles and run from the rugged battle of fate, where we find our true strength. If our young miscarry in their first enterprises, they lose all heart. If the young merchant fails, men say he is ruined. If the finest genius studies at college and is not installed in an office within 1 year afterwards in Boston or New York, it seems to everyone that he has the right to be disheartened. A sturdy lad who in turn tries all the professions, keeps a school, preaches, edits a newspaper, goes to Congress, buys a township, and so forth in successive years, and always like a cat falls on his feet, is worth 100 of these city dolls. He does not postpone his life. He lives already. It's time not to pity, but to revere the man who tosses the laws, the books, the idolatries, and customs out the window. Self-reliance means nothing less than a revolution in all the offices and relations of men, in their religion, in their education, in their pursuits. In all these areas we look too much abroad and too little to ourselves. As soon as man is at one with God, he ceases to beg. Instead, he sees prayer in every action, or true prayers heard throughout nature. The soul is no traveler. The wise man stays at home with the soul, and when his duties call him from his house or into foreign lands, he is at home still. He who travels in search of amusement or to gain something he doesn't carry within travels away from himself. It is from a lack of self-culture that man seeks culture in foreign lands. Those who have traveled soon learn that place means nothing. Any sadness they have within, they carry with them. This rage for travel is symptomatic of a deeper unsoundness which affects all intellectual action. The intellect is vagabond, and our system of education fosters restlessness. In educational systems, endless imitation like traveling is another form of escapism. Our opinions, our tastes, our whole minds follow the past and the distant, just as a traveler does. Yet wherever the arts have flourished, it was the soul that created it. It was in the mind of the artist, when beauty and grandeur are just as near to us in our own minds. Insist on yourself, never imitate. Obey your heart, and you shall reproduce greatness. Life has become flabby and easy. Man has got a watch but can no longer tell the time from the sun. Man has an almanac but can't recognize one star in the heavens. Through machinery, we have lost energy and refinement. To become so over-civilized is to lose touch with the primitive, the elemental, with nature. Yet in spite of all these external changes, the moral standard doesn't change. Men are not greater now than they once were. The great men of the first age and of the last age are equal. New inventions are superficial and do nothing to inspire men. New machinery doesn't increase our chance of greatness and may even do more harm than good. Great genius always returns to the essential man. Men measure their esteem of each other on the basis of property, what each has. But a cultivated man becomes ashamed of property. He knows this, that which a man is brings him the only real property, permanent and living property, which is not subject to rulers, mobs, revolutions, fires, storm, or bankruptcies, but which perpetually renews itself. Our dependence on false property has made us slaves of numbers. How much? How many? But it is only when man pulls away from external support and stands alone that he is strong and will prevail. He is weak only because he has looked for good outside of himself. The return of your absent friend or some other quite external event raises your spirits, and you think good days are preparing for you. Do not believe it. It can never be so. Nothing can bring you peace but yourself. Nothing can bring you peace but the triumph of principles. The false value put on materialism and property. The cowardice of conformity, self-reliance relies on the soul's affinity with God. Man must learn to trust his own thoughts and not wait to have them validated by someone else who appears wiser and greater. Society is a conspiracy against the manhood of the individual because it holds conformity as the greatest virtue. Give nothing for the opinion of others, who are neutral and honest in their assessment of what they see, and who don't worry about the consequences of their honesty. Man mustn't be swayed by what society says is goodness. He must himself decide what is good. Nothing is sacred but the integrity of the mind. The only thing that is really good is that which aligns itself with man's true nature. Men worry about changing their thoughts and opinions, but this worry disappears when man gives up caring what others will think of him, when he realizes variety is part of nature, and that even variety is illusionary, since it exists within unity. The self-reliant man is centered in the present. Self-reliance requires solitude so that man may connect with his inner self. There is a moral standard that is eternal and never changes. Men are not greater now than they once were, and are no less great. Greatness is always there when we remain true to our real selves. Such externals as travel, social institutions, and property can never bring true and lasting happiness. This comes only from within, after discovering one's intuition and the source of that intuition. The absolute necessity of living from the inside outward, rather than from the outside inward. A man must discover his inner nature, what is unique about him, and then must act on the conviction of that self. If he does this, he becomes a man of the soul and avoid the distractions and dangers of external society, as well as the world of past and present. All this tempts him to conform, seems a more comfortable, secure, and easier course. But real happiness, genius, and greatness are achieved only by discovering and remaining true to the inner and eternal voice of intuition.